my darling daughter-in-law, Leslie Bruce. She's part of the family here at the Gathering Church and part of my personal family. Very supportive wife of my son Ryan, your pastor Ryan, and of some of my wonderful grandchildren, Joey and Lizzie. And let's not forget my grand dog, Maxie. Fantastic grand dog. Leslie is a wonderful cook. She makes the best pecan pie ever, and she makes the best salted chocolate chip cookies. But she's also impeccable in regards to her style, her skill, and her reputation, especially at work where she oversees 30 employees in the city of Long Beach. She's a very busy woman who does all of this very well because of her relationship with the very gracious God and our Savior, Jesus Christ. She's with us today, and she's going to share her story of how her relationship with Christ came to be and how it makes all the difference in her life today. So please welcome with me Leslie Bruce. You are a very busy woman. In fact, yours is a really busy family. Your husband is fully engaged in the Way Out Ministries as assistant pastor, worship leader, and youth pastor. And now he's, making the abandoned farmhouse. So he's very
and
busy.
The media director of so many different media.
Technology. Your children are busy in school, homework, after-school activities, and you're a full-time employee in the Long Beach Police Department. And then there's Maxie. I thought you guys were crazy when you brought Maxie into your busy family, the 3-foot-high pit bull terrier. Not a small dog.
But she thinks she's a lap dog.
She does think she's a lap dog. But I got to say that she was a great addition to your family. I'm not a great dog lover, but I love that dog. I love both of my grand dogs, actually. And even my dog, yes, I love Bailey as well. So how important is it in this crazy busy family? How important is your relationship with Jesus and keeping all of this together?
It's definitely number one. We couldn't do it all. There's too many cares every day. There's too many worries and struggles and things to stress about. If you don't really prioritize and focus on what's important in your life, you'll just let that go. And so for us, that's Jesus. That's being a part of this family here at the Gathering and all the different things that the Way Out Ministries is doing. So it's the foundation.
And there's all kinds of trials and tribulations that come into every family. There's a need for security. There's need for finances. There's need for being at school events, etc. I mean, life gets crazy busy for everybody. But when there's 2 full-time employees as parents, it can get really crazy. And so Jesus helps to ground you. You told me that you grew up in Graham, Washington, 1 hour south of Seattle, for those of you who are familiar with Washington State. Most Americans would call that living there an ideal family. Your father was a fireman, your mother was a stay-at-home mom, and you and your older sister lived in financial security. You told me that you felt safe, that you felt secure, that you felt encouraged, and that you saw life full of opportunity, but there was no relationship with God in your family at all. Explain that to us.
Yeah, so my mom was raised Catholic. She's Italian, so it's actually a very similar cultural situation as Mexicans who are Catholic. So you'll say you're Catholic, but you don't necessarily have a strong faith. So that's how she was raised, and she saw that hypocrisy in her family. And so growing up, she really rebelled against her faith and against the religion, even though my grandparents continued, to be faithful, going to church. She just saw that just because you act one way on Sunday, you don't act that way on Saturday or Friday or the rest of the week. So she saw it as a very just, religious and false thing. So she rebelled from it and just decided she didn't want to have any religion in her life. My dad could care less either way. He was in the Army, not him, my grandpa was in the Army. So he was just kind of bounced around his whole life. My grandpa went into several different wars all through right after World War II, he was in basically every war until he retired. So my dad had a really busy life, and God just wasn't part of that as a military child.
Now, his side of the family claimed to be Episcopalian,
Yes.
but you never saw a church.
No,
He
they
never.
definitely didn't go to church.
Okay.
So no one talked about God, and my parents had decided that when me and my sister were young, they were just going to let us decide if we wanted to go to church at some point in the future. And so if you don't expose your kids to it, they're not even going to know that it's a thing. So I didn't know what God was. I didn't know what church was. I had zero knowledge.
But you were a smart kid, and you always did very well in school. You were a deep thinker. You were inquisitive. So did you have any thoughts growing up about the existence of God? Did you come to any conclusions yourself?
I did. So I tested into the gifted programs in elementary school. So they put me into kind of the fast track of all this deep thinking, like you mentioned. So from 6th grade all the way up through high school, I was in all the honors classes and special classes, and we learned Greek mythology. We learned, we were doing very high level, I think college level sometimes, assignments at a young age. And so even now it's much worse, but still back then in that educational culture, it was very much God is for stupid people, because clearly if you were smart, you'd understand that God is not real. And so those kinds of messages were really underlying everything I was learning, and the books, philosophers, we were reading all these, the ones you hate, everything you hate.
Everything I hate.
Those were my assignments, to read excerpts from these, at 13, 14 years old. So I was really forming these ideas, like, I'm so smart, I know everything, and God is not real.
Did you ever, in your young childhood, take down one of those stupid Christian people with your
No.
intellect?
And not in person, maybe in my mind.
Oh, okay.
But not in confrontation. No.
That's good.
Because I didn't know any Christians.
Oh, okay. So in Romans chapter 1, 19 through 22a, it says, what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power, and his divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made. So the people are without an excuse. For although they knew God, they neither glorified God nor they gave thanks to him. But their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools. What is wise to man is foolishness to God. And so even though you felt very intellectually superior in regards to, knowing that God was a myth, in God's eyes, you were really foolish, and so was your family. And that's something that we all need to remember, that God sees things much differently than we do. And according to Scripture, someday we're going to be held accountable for everything that he has provided to show us himself. You shared earlier that Jesus keeps your family together, even in trials. Your family had no glue, no Jesus glue, so to speak, to hold them together when hard times came. So how old were you when your family finally blew apart, and what actually happened there?
Yeah, it was a process. It's not an overnight thing that families fall apart. So it was a process. So the first thing, my dad lost his job. He was a career firefighter for almost 20 years. And he was on a call at an abandoned van that they found a meth lab inside this van. It's in the middle of nowhere, and we're talking very rural area where I grew up. Middle of nowhere, so he goes in, and his job is to clean up the meth and whatever hazardous substances are there, so that they can remove it and clear the scene. And he saw a wrench. He was a hobbyist mechanic, you could say. He could do all of his work on his own car, and he had a specific job he was waiting to do, but he needed a wrench. And he found this wrench, and he said it was about a $15 wrench, and he just thought, cool, I need this wrench, I'm gonna take it. And then he was so excited to finish his job, and he told one of his friends he worked with, hey, I got this wrench, I found it at that van, I finished this job, now my car's working. And his friend reported him for stealing. Yeah, and so I don't know the full story, because there must have been more to it than just that. But firefighters are union agencies. They went through the whole union process, all the appeals, and at the end they terminated him over it, supposedly just that.
He had been a fireman for how long?
Almost 20 years for the same agency. Yeah.
So for a $15 wrench, he was fired.
Yeah.
Lost his pension.
Everything. Yeah.
Wow. Suddenly,
Yeah.
security was ripped away.
Yeah. So my parents owned a home. They had, worked really hard earlier in life to save up to buy that home, and so now they have a mortgage, no jobs. As you can imagine, a lot of stress in the house. So my mom was a licensed hairdresser before she was a stay-at-home mom, so she had kept up her license so she could do kind of odd jobs for friends from home. And so at that time, she got a full-time job at Fantastic Sam's. I think they're still around. So
Yeah,
she started working
they are
there.
still around. I checked. There's thousands of Fantastic Sam's.
Yeah, so she found the closest one nearby, and she went to work full-time at Fantastic Sam's. My dad started scrambling looking for jobs, and so just during that time, I think it was just a rough period of their marriage anyways. They were already kind of having some struggles, and that was really too difficult for what they were already going through. And so the arguing and fighting just really escalated to a point probably within 6 months, I'd say, of when he was fired. They just had a really epic blow up one day. Nothing physical, they were never physical, but just screaming, yelling, and to the point where my mom said that I've had enough, I can't take it, I'm moving out. And, as a firefighter, my dad would be gone a lot. He'd be gone overnight, and so my mom was like there all the time. So the thought of me and my sister were just, the thought of my mom leaving, it was like the world was ending. So we just start scream, crying, like, you can't leave us, Mom, you can't leave, don't do it, don't do it. And so my dad says, well, fine, I'll leave. And it's something that still cuts me to the core today because, as we'll talk about later, and many of you already know, my dad died not too long after that. And so I just remember, I stopped crying. Like, okay, you go. I don't want Mom to go, but you can go. So my dad moved out.
Well, you were used to him being gone. The firefighter's gone
Yeah.
often,
Yeah.
and your mom was always there.
She was always there, yeah.
So it's understandable that both of you girls would freak out if your mom was going to leave the house.
Yeah.
She shared with me that your mom and dad did eventually divorce, and that you found yourself alone much of the time, which was what both of you girls were panicked about in the first place. So how did these feelings affect you in school and in other relationships?
Yeah, being at home felt really stressful to me, very insecure. I wasn't sure kind of what the environment was going to be like from day to day. My mom might be gone. She might be in a bad mood. She was working a lot. She actually went back to school to get her certificate to be a dental assistant because she knew a hairdresser wasn't going to keep, paying the bills and paying the mortgage. So she was going to school and still doing hair full time. So she was really busy. My sister, I think by that time she was about 16, so she had a car. So kind of my sister was driving me around to school and where I had to go, and my dad had moved out, and my mom was not really around. So I was alone a lot, and because my sister was 16, any second she could leave and not take her little annoying sister, she would be gone. So I was just stuck there, 14, 15 years old.
So school became your happy place?
Yes, so school became my happy place. I really just dove into that. I wanted to be perfect, so I was insistent on getting straight A's forever.
In everything. You were in volleyball, you were in marching band,
Yep.
and you were on the honors team.
Yeah.
But you also felt a strong need to have a boyfriend.
Yes.
And make everything better. So you had your first crush in the 10th grade, and he turned out to be a little possessive, and you broke up because you had friends. That was a good breakup.
Yes.
You had been so involved in school and other activities, but how about if you went through that divorce and let's say you weren't involved in school? We've talked to many people that at the same chair that you're in that ended up in drugs, ended up doing desperate things. If you weren't in school, if you weren't plugged in, do you think maybe you would have been more desperate and maybe have gone with a crowd maybe and got into drugs and things like that?
I don't think so because I'm definitely more of an introvert. So, like I said, I really just, sank into myself, and I would just be in my room by myself with the door shut all the time, like listening to music. Actually hung up Christmas lights around my room in the middle of the year just because I wanted like a peaceful feeling. So I wasn't drawn to be out with other people. I really wanted to kind of seclude myself so I could feel those feelings, because if I was with other people, I was that perfect person. And that perfect person can't, be sustained all the time. So I needed my time alone in my room to really feel how I really felt about.
To build that perfect person.
Yes.
So, so when you were around people, you had to keep things up. You had to
Yes.
keep the persona
I was the good girl.
going.
I was always the good girl.
Okay. And you took pride in that,
Yes.
really. Did your, I was going to say your second crush, Michael. Let's talk about Michael for a minute.
Yeah.
Your second crush. Your first crush left, your second crush came. He was a Christian boy. He was a former Mormon even. How did he introduce you to Jesus?
Yeah. So I could have, at that time, I still could have cared less about God and church. And, I was getting older, so I knew some people went to church. I was like, it's not for me. But I like this guy. So, of course, it was like anything he does, I'm interested in. So we became friends the summer before junior year. And he just brought it up one day and what's your thoughts on this? We'd have really deep conversations. He was in the honors classes with me too. So we'd have really deep conversations and he would start asking me questions. And I'd say, well, no, God's not real. God's a myth. Those are just stories. Remember we read about that? Karl Marx was telling us. Don't you remember? And he started asking questions what about this and what about that? And because he was a former Mormon, he had really spent time learning Christianity because that's how we realized he didn't want to be a Mormon anymore, that it was a false religion. So he knew a lot of the really foundational facts about Christianity, including really scientific things. I was always very drawn to science. So I thought, if you can't prove it, it must not be real. And so he had spent a lot of time finding the little things, kind of the verse you said about he's made it known to us around the whole world. So if you look at things in creation, you can really see that God does exist if you open your heart.
But you have to look.
You have to look. You have to look.
And if nobody asks you the questions,
Yeah.
if you're never looking, and if you're always being given the answers by people
Yeah.
who aren't looking, you just accept it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that really concerns me in our world today with kids going to school. They just believe what they're told and they ask no questions. And actually, nowadays, they're discouraged from asking questions. There's no dialogue. You just need to hear what we have to teach and you need to accept it. That's dangerous because people do just accept things. But when you started getting asked questions that you couldn't answer, you wanted to find the answers yourself, and then you just decided that Jesus is real.
Yeah.
And so you received Christ?
Yep.
Did you go to his church or his youth group?
Yeah, he was active in a youth group, so I started going to his youth group with him, and I kind of became one of the friends with his group of friends who was all Christians, and I went to their a weeknight youth group Bible study, and their youth pastor led me to the Lord.
Now,
after.
this was in high school, so for
Yeah.
all you high school people out there that think, I'm just going to keep my faith to myself and be all quiet about it, don't do that. There's people like Leslie out there, she's too smart, she'll take me down. Apparently not. God's word is living and active, sharper than a double-edged sword, right? I mean, it cuts through things. It can cut through anything. But you have to speak it out. So it's really important that we all share our faith. I think that's a very important thing for us to see there. What did you tell your parents that you had become a Christian?
I did. I told them, quietly, said, I'm going to start going to church. So I didn't really tell them the deep change of heart I had had. But I told them, I'm going to start going to church now. And by that time I was 16, so I had my license too. And I would take my mom's car and go to, meet my boyfriend at church, and I'd go twice a week with him.
Did they roll their eyes at you, or did they just kind of accept it as a whatever?
I don't remember. I don't think they even noticed I left.
Okay. So did you get baptized?
No,
Okay.
I never got baptized.
Okay.
There.
So it says in Matthew 5:45 that he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, that he sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Well, now you were a Christian. But again, even as a Christian, trials can come into our life. And of course, as a Christian, we now have someone to face those trials with. But tribulations and trials really did come into your life. Your dad was diagnosed with cancer. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So years had passed, but he had, gotten a different job. He worked at a hospital then. He met a new woman who worked at the hospital with him. So they were living together. They kind of had their own life, and I was still with my mom. She had moved on, and she had a new boyfriend she was very serious with, and he actually had moved in with us. So there was just kind of different dynamics with the family. But I still felt like, okay, things are okay. We're moving on. Life, I'm growing up. Things are normalizing. And then it was January of my junior year, and I remember I was getting ready. I had to go to the varsity basketball game because I was in the marching band, and we had to go to all the sports events. So I'm getting ready to go to the basketball game, and I get a phone call. I'm making dinner, and my dad says, "Hey, I've got some bad news. Been to the doctor. I've had some testing, and I have colon cancer." And he said it's all in his colon, and by the time he was diagnosed, it had already spread to his liver. So he said, "It's okay. I'm going to beat it. They've got all these plans. I'm going to get some surgeries, and then we're going to go on these treatments." And he was very, very optimistic. And his girlfriend was a physician's assistant, so she was pretty highly trained in the medical field. And so she said she had some connections, and she was going to get him into some great hospitals and get him the best treatment there was. So that was the message I heard. And obviously, you don't hear that and think hope at first.
Yeah.
But he was so optimistic about it that I did, once the first shock of it set in, I really did start to think, he was going to be okay. So that spring, I went, waited at the hospital 12 hours at a time. He had 12 inches of his colon removed, something like 60% of his liver. Then he started radiation treatments all the time, so he lost all his hair, went the whole thing.
Oh, it's hard to see.
Yeah.
Very hard. And then your boyfriend, Michael, broke up with you also.
Yeah. So he tried to break up with me that spring. I think he just realized, I was a lot of drama. There was a lot going on in my life, and he wanted to just be, a fun young guy and have fun in high school. So he broke up with me that spring, but I kind of
He broke up with you at school.
Yeah, because he tried to break up with me at home, and I threw a tantrum. There's no other way to describe it. Ryan's seen my tantrums. I threw an epic tantrum. It was embarrassing for a 17-year-old, but I couldn't imagine him. I was madly in love with him. I was the kind of I still am the kind of dedicated person that I would have married him. I would have followed that through as high school sweethearts and gotten married if that was the path. So I couldn't imagine him leaving me at a time like that, right? So he agreed to stay with me. He's like, "Never mind, I do still love you." So we were kind of together.
just to calm you down.
Calm me down.
Yeah.
So that was at the summer. So just a few more weeks passed, and the first day of senior year, he broke up with me after first period. I was like, "We're walking to second period together," and he was like, "No, I've had enough. This is it." So he broke up with me there at school.
But you kept your composure.
I had to keep my composure because I was that perfect person. So I went to calculus and just held it in till I went home. So I was single my whole senior year, and I was just desperately looking for another boyfriend because I felt like that was the thing that was going to ground me and keep me secure. And I did have a relationship with the Lord. I was a very strong believer at that time. And so I knew I had to keep going to church. So I couldn't go to his church. I just couldn't bear to be around him. So I had some other friends that I had met. Once people started hearing that I was at church, people at church. Once people heard that you're a Christian, they kind of come to you like, "Oh, I'm a Christian too. I'm a Christian too." So I had made a couple other friends, and I knew they had an active youth group they went to. So I started going to that church. So I was meeting with their prayer group. We were praying for my dad all the time. So I really had a strong foundation. But I still had this, loneliness in my soul. Like I needed a boyfriend. That's different. That's not a friend. I wanted a boyfriend. I wanted a man to keep me secure.
So you could have a relationship with God, but he can't hug you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way that we often feel. We think I need something physical instead of just spiritual. But of course, the deeper we fall in love with God, we realize that what He is enough. The more you trust in Him, the more you realize He is enough. But of course, when you're young, you've got other thoughts going on in your head. You graduated from high school. You graduated with honors, of course. And your aunt wanted to reward you. So you ended up spending a week in Mexico with her. And you also received a full-ride scholarship to the University of Washington. So how did these two developments then change the course of your life forever?
Yeah. So part of my parents' divorce deal a few years before I graduated was that my mom and I, because my sister, she had gone off to college by that time, so it was really just about me and my mom. They agreed so that I wouldn't have to be uprooted in the middle of high school, that my mom could keep the house until I'd graduated high school. So she had to put it on the market and sell it. So already that was kind of the ticking clock of, things are changing. So I graduate high school. My mom's got the house on the market. She's already taking stuff out of my room, putting it up so the realtors, it looks more, like you could put your toddler in that room instead of your 18-year-old daughter lives there. So, they're just literally changing things around me.
Was that disturbing?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was disturbing. I lived there since I was 3, so it was all I could remember was like, that's my room, that's my house. So that was the first, kind of hard blow at that time. And then, like you mentioned, I went to Mexico, and I literally spent my whole senior year desperately seeking for a boyfriend.
You were actually asking people.
I was asking boys out.
Their girlfriend.
Flat out telling them, like, I like you, you're cool, let's hang out. And I don't know, maybe I was too forward, but God had other plans for me because I got turned down time after time after time. I really did. So no one wanted to be with me.
Oh, jeez, that must have been a little discouraging.
It was. So in Mexico, found a boy there. So we hit it off there in Mexico, and we decided, we really liked each other. So he lived in Anaheim, just down the street here, and I went back home to Washington and packed up my childhood home, and we sparked up a long-distance relationship.
Yeah. So you were living in the dorm at Washington University.
Yep.
80,000 people campus. Wow.
Yeah.
You could get lost on a campus like that.
Yeah.
You lived in the dorm, and your dorm mate, she had other things going on in her life.
Yeah, we went to the same school in high school, so I thought, I'll be comfortable. I'm with my, close friend from high school. We'll stay together in the dorm. But she had a high school sweetheart, and she went home every weekend from Thursday until Monday. So she had condensed all her classes in just a couple days. So now here I am again, completely alone, just in the middle of chaos. If you've ever been to like a Pac-10 major university, it is like the movies. My dorm specifically was a co-ed dorm. I didn't choose it. They just, because I was on a scholarship and financial aid, they're just like, here's your room. It's free. I was like, yay. But boys were across the hall from me. Boys were next door to me, and it's just rowdy, loud. They were going to the frat parties all the time, and I was a perfect student. So I was in studying, focusing, trying to learn everything, do the best I could, and so I just kept to myself again. So I would just call my boyfriend down in Anaheim and just cry about how miserable I was. And so after weeks of that, he was like, why are you putting yourself through this? Why are you doing that? Just come down here. You're young. Come, just start over. Do something down here in California. Come live with me. And so he kind of just kept telling me, come live with me, come live with me. And I remember it was probably around Thanksgiving, I told my mom, I'm going to drop out of school and go move to California.
So you're going to drop out of a school that you had a full-ride scholarship to.
Yeah, I could have gone there for 4 years for free. Yeah. Everything was
But
crazy.
you were lonely.
I couldn't picture it. I couldn't get past where I was then to picture what it would be like if I'd stuck through.
So you told your parents you're going to take Ryan up on his offer.
And I'm going to go move in with him and his mom and
What
his
what
great
did,
aunt.
what did your parents say about that?
I think they just thought I was crazy. Young love, you're going to make your stupid mistakes and do wild things, but you'll figure out the error of your ways and screw up, fail miserably, and come back home.
So did you pray about this move?
No, I didn't. I didn't.
You were a Christian girl, but you didn't pray about it.
Yeah.
Because you were just so set on what you needed to do. Walking away from God or going your own direction, especially for college students. I see this happen so much, and I know Ryan does too as a youth pastor. Kids are strong, following Jesus in youth club, and then they graduate from high school, and then they go to college, and then all of a sudden their relationship with God is just nothing. And it gets less and less and less. So many young people actually just leave Christ in college. The statistics show that, Christian kids leave God in college by record numbers. What's your advice to such young people who are doing this right now?
I think to know that you're not above the statistics. It's probably going to happen to you if you let it happen to you. And it's not like you make a conscious choice, I'm not going to be a Christian anymore. you just stopped doing the things that reminded you of your faith, and you stopped being around those people, and you stopped having those kind of mile markers throughout your day, throughout your life, until you look around and you're like, I don't even know that I identify as a Christian anymore. People wouldn't identify me as one because of how they see you acting. So I would say don't start college day one, fresh out of high school, and think that's not going to be me. I'm fine. I got this. I don't need to go to church. I'm going to watch it online, because you're going to have to study, and you're going to have a midterm, and there's going to be a party, and then you're not going to watch Bible study online. You're not going to call up your Christian friend back home because you have so many new friends where you are now. So I think it's to be intentional and know that you need to set yourself up for success, and so get yourself plugged into whatever you can. And I would say be bold and be brave, and make a new friend. Google, where's the Christian club where I am? Figure out how to plug yourself into that network. Ask your friends if they know, do you have a cousin? Do you have family around here? Anyone who goes to church I can, meet up with for coffee. Whatever you could do to have at least one person
Amen. That's a great
you keep
idea.
accountable.
Ecclesiastes 12:1-2 says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come, and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark and the clouds return after the rain. So you moved in with Ryan, number one.
Yep.
You signed up for school at Golden West College, and you lived with Ryan for about 1 year, and his mother and his aunt were also in the house. So you lived with him for about a year, and then he moved out.
He moved out after, I was with him for about a year. He moved out after maybe 6 months because apparently I'm a lot. I was too much. I was smothering him by living with him.
So he left you with his mom and his aunt.
Yeah,
and he got his own apartment. Wow, what was happening here? And you continued to have a relationship with him. You would just visit him in his apartment, and then you would go back to his mother and his aunt.
Yeah.
Okay. You wanted to even marry this guy.
Like I said, I probably would have, because I'm such a dedicated person. I wouldn't have given up on him if he had treated me right and been a good guy, ultimately.
So, Alone Again Naturally. I don't know if you know that song. The 70s.
I saw it in the notes and I laughed.
The 70s song from Gilbert O'Sullivan. Oh, you got to listen to it. You would go, oh my gosh, that would have been your theme song at this time. And then, of course, while you're alone again, you're thinking of your mom's words. Don't ever depend on a man, she always said, for security. Never depend on a man for security, going through your head. But Jesus is the God-man, let's not forget. And he can be trusted. In John 14:27, he said, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give it to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. So again, did you consider Jesus at all during this time for your security, for your peace of mind?
I didn't, because everything became even more of a whirlwind. Things got extremely chaotic. My dad's cancer was getting worse. If you've ever battled cancer with someone, it gets better, it gets worse. You have times where you think, you're cured, you're fine, everything's going to go back to normal. But then the next day it's back and it's worse than ever. So it was kind of going through that up and down. I was very deep in school. I'd gotten a job at Starbucks, so I was working part-time at Starbucks. I was extremely busy at that time. And so by that fall, this was fall of 2005, I finally got the call from my dad that he had been fine, and he'd had one of those really optimistic conversations with me not too long before, and said his treatment was working, the doctors are happy, his tumors are shrinking, things are great. And then just a couple days later, he calls me and says, I had an accident, I fell down, they did some MRIs, and the cancer's in my brain, it's messing up my coordination, and they say it doesn't look good. Do you think you can come visit me? And I just knew, and then I think my aunt, his sister, had called me shortly after that and was like, Leslie, he's not making it. You need to come home. So I actually got that call while I was working at Starbucks, and this Ryan worked there with me. So that's how we met. because I had another boyfriend and I was so focused on everything in my life, the only thing I remembered about Ryan was his first day of work. I was the supervisor, so I trained him that day. And we got in a shipment of all the cups and all the syrups and supplies. And so I'm unloading the boxes, and there was a huge spider in the back storeroom. And I freaked out. And I was like, hey, you, come here. Kill the spider for me. And he was like, okay. And he just ran over and killed it. And, he tells me the story later on. He was like, whew, had to come kill a spider for you. And
But if it had been a rat or a mouse,
I didn't know that at the time.
he would have been devastated.
He was my knight in shining armor. So when I got that really terrible call from my dad and knew that, like, this is it, it's the worst, I was there and he was there and I didn't know it. And so this is something, if you've been through, a serious trauma in your life, you really block out a lot of the memories. But he remembers being there, and I went in the back room and I told the manager, I have to go. I have a family emergency. I need to leave. I'm going to be gone for a while. And she was like, okay, well, here's the employee list. Can you get your shifts covered? So I'm just frantic, I guess, trying to figure out who can I call, what are my shifts, who's going to cover for me. Because I depended on that job. I was a young college student. I needed that job. I couldn't lose it and just walk away. So he was there, and he said, just go home. I'll deal with it. I'll either work your shifts for you, or I'll call and make sure they're covered. So that's a great story that he tells. That he tells me, because I don't remember that. But I do remember just being frantic, going home.
You just remember being frantic and having to get to your dad.
Yes.
But it was great that somebody stepped in and took your load off of you.
Yes.
He also, I know, prayed with you.
Which I don't remember.
Yeah, he was telling his mom and dad about this girl at work for a while, and we could tell he likes this supervisor. But he was sharing about your dad and how much that upset him, and how he's able to pray with you, and how he was taking your shifts. And your dad did die while you were in Washington. And then you had to actually return after his death and take a midterm and then fly back. Yeah. And you were still now with Ryan 1. What was his reaction to all this?
I forget so many details, like I mentioned, because it was such a traumatic time, but he wasn't supportive. I don't think he cared. He barely came by. He might have said sorry, sorry about that. But nothing major. He didn't offer to come with me. He didn't even offer to come up for the funeral. And actually, I woke up at 2 a.m. thinking about my stories, because I'm that kind of, anxiety thinker person. I don't know if anyone's like that, but at 2 a.m. I was planning everything I was going to say. And I remembered I only went up for the funeral for one day. I'd never done that. I felt like a business traveler, and I flew up at like 5 a.m, and I had to fly back home at 8 p.m. so I could go to school the next day. So he didn't even offer to do that with me, a one day flight to go to a funeral. But he bought me a puppy. I remembered that. That was his response.
You a puppy.
I don't have time to hang out with you. I don't know if I even like you anymore, but here's a puppy.
Here's a puppy.
So, and he didn't tell his mom or his aunt who I lived with. So now I'm just the random person with a puppy.
That's where
that's where Franklin came from. Yeah.
Okay. I always wondered where Franklin came from. He came from Ryan 1.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Okay. You learn something every day.
Yeah.
What a guy. Here's a
What
puppy. Nobody in the house wants it, but here it is. And I'm going to go back to my apartment now. You eventually dumped this guy.
Yes. So.
What was the arrangement you and Ryan had about shedding off your
Yeah. So as I was
relationships?
learning how to grieve and move past the loss of my dad, I was growing closer to Ryan Bruce at work, because he was just a light. He was, someone you could turn to. I just looked at Martha, and you're going to make me cry. Just thinking of you. Thinking how much I love Ryan. He was just such a great person that he just made me feel joy in a time that I was so dark. Like, just being in his presence was joy. I didn't think I was going to cry. So I just started to gravitate towards, I'd rather talk to him, I'd rather be around him, and I guess I started saying things at work like, oh, my dumb boyfriend, he is the worst. He never hangs out with me. I don't even know why I'm with him. And he would just say, why don't you hang out with me? Let's go out. I'll take you out. I'll do this. I'll do that. So he was getting very forward with how much he liked me. And so we were both honorable people, and I was like, I technically have a boyfriend. I can't, like, date you. But we had both...
And he bought me a puppy after.
Yeah, and he bought me a puppy. So I have a puppy, too. So we had decided that we really did like each other, and there was something here just by, talking. We actually wrote notes to each other at work, like little handwritten notes, and we'd stick them in a little cubby, and then if we didn't have the same shift, we had little notes.
Did you save any of those notes?
I think I did, but now I don't remember if I have them, but I saved them for a long time. Ryan doesn't let me save anything, so if I don't have them, it's not because I didn't care, it's because he throws everything away.
Oh, all right.
He calls it clutter. So we had decided, you know what, our other, and he did have a girlfriend too, but he wasn't as upfront about having a girlfriend. But I'll be very kind to his story, because he doesn't like if I say that he didn't tell me he had a girlfriend, but he didn't really consider her a real girlfriend. So it was like they were casually dating in his mind. So he did eventually tell me about this other girl, and we decided we didn't want these other people in our lives. We wanted to be together. So we made a pact, and we said, today after work, we're going to go home. You call her, I'll call him. We're going to break it off, and then we can go on a date. So we went and did that. Mine was quick and easy. I was done with the guy. His was a little more complicated because this girl really loved him.
You did keep the dog.
I did keep the dog.
You loved the dog.
I did. He was a good dog. He was a good dog.
So there was another girl at work also who
Yes.
liked Ryan, and she was voicing her protest.
Yes.
And that changed something in your heart. Explain that story.
Yes. So if you've ever been to a Starbucks, there's always like a clique of Starbucks people who all know each other very well. And so she was kind of in that clique and a friend of a friend. And she had a crush on Ryan, because who wouldn't, right? And so she found out that Ryan liked me. And she kind of caused a scene one day in front of me, in front of a lot of people. And she was like, I don't even know why you would like her. She's not even a Christian. And it cut me to the core, because I was a Christian, but I hadn't been living like a Christian. I hadn't told anyone that I was a Christian, in a past life. Yeah. So I really realized I needed to go back to church. I needed to rededicate, do something. And I didn't really know where to start. And so I think if you didn't offer me to give this advice, but I just feel compelled to give you advice.
Good.
If you find there's no right way to like rededicate your life. It's not like you can plan for it. So I didn't know what to do, but I had another friend that I was close to at Starbucks, and she went to a church. And I knew Ryan went to a church, and it's one of those scenarios where I was like, I can't just show up with him at church and have this like rededication moment in front of him. I wanted to like get right before I did that, which I don't think is necessary. Looking back, I should have just gone with him. It probably would have been like a great moment in our lives.
But it's that perfect thing.
Yes.
That you were employing again.
Yes.
I can't look like that. I'm his girlfriend, and now all of a sudden, I'm rededicating my life at the service. Yeah.
So I didn't think I needed to rededicate my life. I just was like, I'll just go to church so I can get back into going to church. And I went to my friend's church, and I think it was a Sunday, and I sat down in the pew, and it was like the Holy Spirit like weighed on me so heavy. We were singing worship songs that I had sung a few, this was only like three years since I had been very strong in my faith in high school. And so it was the same songs that I was singing back then, and just the Holy Spirit like flooded my soul. I just was crying and crying, just realizing all the things I had done wrong, all the sins I had committed just because I had really walked away from my faith. So I had that moment. The pastor did an altar call that day. I went up again just because I wanted to pray with someone about it. And so from then on, I was like, this is it. I'm never walking away again.
That's great. It says in Colossians 2, 6 and 7, it says, so then, just as you received Christ, Jesus as Lord, continue then to live your life in him, rooted and built up in him, strengthened in the faith, as you were taught, and overflowing with thankfulness. Also in John 10:27, it says, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. So when you heard the voice of God speaking to you in that church, you realized, oh, that's the voice I haven't been listening to for a while. And that's why you came back. God calls us. Even though we may walk away from him, he does not walk away from us. We've seen that. That's a reoccurring pattern in these table talks that we've been having. God does not walk away. When we call on him, he stays with us. Some even call the Holy Spirit the hound of heaven, right? That's not sacrilegious. That's just saying he gets your scent and he is on you and he will chase you through your whole life until you surrender because he is jealous for you. Thank God that he is. So your first date with my son was on Valentine's Day, 2006. How romantic is that? 10 months later, you were engaged on December 10th, which was Terrell and my anniversary. You're beginning to see a pattern in Ryan of this tradition. You were only 20 years old at the time, and people told you, this is never going to last. This is nuts. But Ryan said something to you as you were going through an engagement book together that made you realize that it would. What did he say to you?
Yeah, so we didn't have traditional counseling because his dad was the pastor, and so they felt like that was maybe a little awkward to have really deep marriage counseling as a father-son situation. So we had a different pastor we met with briefly, but we did a book together, a devotional about engagement and getting ready for marriage. And so that really prepared us because we were really honest with each other about what we really thought about things, what we wanted in life, like looking through the whole life, not what do we want today, what do we want in the near future. We really, had deep conversations. And one of the topics was about, I think it was just about your ideas of marriage, what it means to you. And through that, he brought up divorce. And he was like, well, what do you think about divorce? And, I came from a family of divorce. I knew other people in my family who had been divorced. And I just thought, well, it's not my goal to get married to get divorced, but I think it's, I guess it could happen to anyone. I said something like that. And he was like, no, like if we're getting married, we're not getting divorced. It doesn't matter what happens. We're not getting divorced. And it was like in that conversation that it sunk in my soul. Like, not only does he really love me, but marriage is like sacred. And it's that safety and security that I had wanted forever. And it wasn't because he's a great man or a perfect man. It's because he taught me to trust in God because God is perfect. And so with him leading our marriage, we're 15 years strong and happier than ever.
Now that's not to say that every day is
No.
a perfect joy, but Philippians 4:13 says you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. And when a man and a wife believe that marriage is sacred and they believe in Christ and they believe that they can do all things in him, then as struggles come, even such a struggle as that happened to your parents, that would have been something instead of divorcing over that they said, hey, wait a minute. We need to seek God. We need to hold on to him. This is a rough time, but we'll get through it. And you can get through it. That's the amazing thing. You can. With Christ. I don't know how people function without Christ in a marriage. I really don't. Because when I think of Terrell and my marriage, I think, oh my gosh, if we didn't have Jesus, we would have blown up a few times. But he has been the stronghold in our marriage, as you've said, that he has been in yours. So your security was threatened again, though, even in your marriage, just even before you committed your life in marriage to Ryan. What was that threat? He was a youth minister. He's a musician. He's a Christian. Not a great money-making bunch of options there. So that's one thing. But he was really into music, wasn't he? And he was supposed to be touring with Christafari. Yeah. How did you feel about that?
It kind of sprung up. He wasn't doing that when we were dating. This band that he'd always loved, and they were a pretty major band at the time, at least in the Christian band world, and he thought, oh, their drummer quit. I'm going to try out. He didn't think he was even going to get it. So just one day, he's like, I tried out, and they love me, and I'm in. And they're going on tour in a couple months. It's the day after our honeymoon. So
to Europe for 4 weeks.
And he said, and they're going to periodically go on other tours. They're trying to do this whole international thing now. So, what do you think? And I didn't remember all these stories, but Barry reminded me because he was there. He was part of these stories. But I was really concerned about that because, one, I didn't want to be alone. I didn't want to be a newlywed and have a husband gone all the time. But I was also so focused on school. I had finished my AA degree at that time. We were getting married that summer, and I had thought I'm just going to go on in the fall and go get my other 2 years and finish my bachelor's degree. But the thought of me being so grounded by having to go to school, I'm stuck here with my school, and him just being gone out, living life, being a drummer, famous musician, rock star. All the ladies. No. So
Well, at least it was a Christian.
it was a
rock
Christian
group.
band. Yeah, it wasn't that bad. But I don't remember telling him not to do it or not to go. But I think that I had talked to Barry about it, and I was really
I
upset.
remember we had a long talk, and you were, when Leslie gets, I'm going to let a little secret go. When you get really flustered, your neck turns red. It's like
Yeah.
you get a rash that
true.
goes slowly up your neck. And your neck was bright red when we met. And you were very tense. And you said, I just don't know if I can do this. I can't have a husband who's traveling around the world and leaving me alone at home and not there. And I remember I told you, I said, Leslie, Ryan loved music before he loved you. And I said, and not only that, this is his favorite band throughout all of school, and he has been asked to be their drummer. I said, this is dream stuff. And I said, if you tell him that you don't want him to go, he will quit for you. I'm sure of it. And then he will always wonder, what if? I said, you gotta hold to him with these dreams. You have to encourage him in these dreams, and you have to let him do it. And I said, and if you do, then the time will come where he makes up his own decision, and that will be the best thing. And I didn't know if I had succeeded with you or not, because you were still pretty upset when we left and when we prayed. But I was so proud of you at that time. I really was so proud of you when I saw how you encouraged him. I was like, oh, I know she's making this up. She's doing a good job making it. She was very encouraging. And you did get married. You did have a honeymoon. And what, the next day?
Yeah, the next day. We came home for one day. We did laundry, repacked, and then we were at the airport off to Europe. So I did
So
get
you
to
did go for
2
weeks. Mm-hmm. And you loved every minute of it.
Nope.
No, you did not.
It was horrible.
You-
We stayed in hostels and essentially dorms. It was a huge band. It's reggae music, so they had like every instrument in the book. So there was, I think, 11 men. One lady was in the band, and then I was the only I was the only guest who traveled with the 11-person band. So everything was like college style, just dudes laying out, weird food to eat. Not only weird because it was a different culture, but they're like, this is all we had for you today. So they would give us like bread with mayonnaise on it sometimes. So I'm not making that up. They added cheese too. They're like, here's a slice of cheese on bread. Enjoy.
That sounds like missionary work.
It was like missionary. I'd never done a mission work, but it's what it was like. So 2 weeks were like that. I had to go back to work. I could only take off 4 weeks from Starbucks, or they would have to let me go. It's like a law, I guess. So I had to go back to work, and so he stayed on for 2 more weeks, and we found out that his second half of the tour was much more glamorous. He had hotels. He had a private room, I think, once or twice. Yeah, he's shaking his head. He got a private room, so we would have had time together, but we didn't. We were in.
You got to see Big Ben.
We had one day in London, but we were so exhausted, we slept until 3 p.m. Because we had been just grueling through different tour stops and didn't get to recover from jet lag. So by the time we got to London, we were exhausted.
So you saw every concert.
I went to every concert.
You must have been
I was like
sick
the
of
fangirl
Christ the
groupie.
Farmer.
I got stuck at the merch table selling merch for them. I was now their free labor. Yeah.
Terrell
it was
said
fun.
when she picked you up from LAX, she said you were so ecstatic to be
I
home.
was.
What was it, an 18-hour flight?
It was 18 hours by myself because everyone stayed on in Europe, so I had to fly back by myself. It was a very long day, but I was happy to be home.
So Ryan continued music even into your marriage, and even so he eventually left Christafari because they were traveling too much, and he wanted to be more grounded locally. So he joined Dominic Bali, another reggae band, and then Dominic Bali began to blow up.
Yep.
And he ended up on another tour to Brazil. And when did that tour happen?
Well, I think your notes might be slightly wrong. The Brazilian tour, I think, was before Joey was born. So Ryan was gone for 16 days in Brazil. They had very poor phone service over there, so he would go 4 or 5 days without even checking in. So it was really nerve-wracking. I was living in Norwalk in a not-so-safe apartment. So it was pretty stressful to be alone for so many days. But we made it through that one. But then by the time I was pregnant with Joey, they had another tour coming up, and Ryan was really freaking out about the birth date because he was scheduled to be on tour when Joey was supposed to be born. So thankfully, Joey was late. He really was cozy in there. So Joey was 7 days late, and they induced my labor. So Ryan was able to stay because that tour had ended, and then he was with me again. And then the second part of the tour was starting the day after. So the day I got home from the hospital, he left to go on that tour.
Alone again, naturally.
Yeah. Yeah,
Your reoccurring theme. But you had Jesus now.
I did.
You had a supportive church.
Yep.
It was different.
It was different.
And you also knew that you had a very faithful husband.
Yep.
Who did want to be with you. He eventually left Dominic Bali and decided that he would be full-time in ministry here at the Gathering and at the Way Out Ministries, which turned out to be fantastic for us. We're glad that he made that decision. I want you to know I did not coerce him at all to do that, that was something that he decided on his own, wanting to be more of a family man. And he gave up some money for that, but he made a good decision, a great decision. Then, of course, you always had in your heart this desire to have a career. You had been a smart kid. You had been somebody who had always achieved honors throughout school. You graduated with a degree, honors again. And now it was like, I have this degree, I want to do something with it. So you wanted a career, but you were a mother. So how long were you a mother before you were able to step into a career?
Well, we had to make a hard choice as a couple because we knew all along our life plan had to be that I would have a career because we wanted to live here in Southern California, and you all know that's expensive. And so Ryan is on salary here, but he doesn't make a ton of money. So just that one income was never going to be enough to really, buy a home and have, build a good life here. So it was always our plan for me to go in and get a job. So when I graduated college, we had a conversation, and I said, if I get a job, I can't do it halfway. I'm not going to, be a part-time worker and only give it a little bit of care. I'm going to throw my whole heart in because that's just how I do things. But I also want to be a mom, and so are we going to wait and, let years go by until I'm settled in a career and then I have kids and we'll be in our 30s or something? Or are we going to do this now and put off the career? So we were given the offer at that time to move in with Ryan's grandma, Beverly, and because of that, we didn't need 2 incomes at the time. So we had moved in with her. Our plan was just to live there for a couple years, save up some money, and then go get our own house. But because we decided to then have kids at the same time, it was also convenient that I could be a stay-at-home mom because we didn't have all those bills yet. So I wanted to really invest in my kids and raise them right. My mom did a great job as a stay-at-home mom, but because of the later years, things that had happened in my childhood and my relationship with my mom, I just really felt like I wanted to raise my kids right, really invest in them, teach them about the Lord, and have that time with them as little children. So I didn't get a job until Joey was 5. So that meant we were living with Bev for about 7 years, I think, at that time. So a lot longer than 2 or 3 years. And so, so when Joey started kindergarten, that's when I started looking for a job. I got in at the police department there in Long Beach, and that's that. That's history.
And then you were promoted a couple of times since you've been there. And now you have like 30 people under your supervision. Busy life, super busy life. Ryan, super busy. I know. Your kids, very involved. How did your switch to work affect Ryan and the kids?
It was really hard because I was there all the time doing, not that Ryan didn't help out. He was always been an awesome husband and helper. But because he was here working at work, I wanted to work at home. So I did all the cooking, all the cleaning, all the chores, all the errands, everything that needed to be done. I made sure that it was done so that when he wasn't working, we could have time together as a family. So that meant as soon as I was gone from the house, not doing all those things, Ryan had to start doing them. Or we would have to just spend every free moment outside of work doing chores. So we didn't want to do that. So Ryan was able to be flexible with his work here and change things around so that he could take the kids to and from school. He was helping cook. He's definitely helping cleaning. He loves cleaning, actually. So he found a joy in cleaning.
Oh, you got lucky.
I know. I know. So he started doing all of that, and it really had to happen overnight. So it was a hard transition because I think he started to feel a little bit like a housewife. And I'm out at work making the money. So it was a little bit of a weird situation, but we found a lot of balance in that now. Once you adapt to a new job, you can, find a new routine and adapt to that. So I'm definitely helping at home more now.
And then again, the fact that you're believers in Christ and that you have support for one another, and you have a common place that you go, which is to Christ, when you have trials and tribulations, is super important in your marriage. People know that you're a Christian at work?
Yes, slowly over time, people have found out, yes.
And of course, one thing that I did want to wrap up with is just want to ask you about your kids because, full-time mom, full-time dad, both working, kids in school, they're in the public school system. How do you make sure that your kids aren't just left to the system? I mean, because you're busy. When we get busy, it's easy to leave the kids in the care of other people, either at the Boys and Girls Club or in sports or let school do it. How do you make sure that your kids are growing up correctly?
We talk to them and we make them answer. So not like we force them to, but we keep engaging them until they actually do answer us. So we ask them what they learned about at school. What did your teacher tell you? We try to really understand the way that their teachers are giving them this information because they do sometimes spin what should be a normal lesson into some kind of social indoctrination. So Joey particularly had one teacher who was very young and of that new wave of teaching. And so we had to really engage him a lot that year to understand what he was learning and make sure he understood that that was her point of view that she was imposing onto that factual history lesson she was telling. So we were able to kind of dig those bits out of him and help him understand our Christian perspective of history. And just going through, knowing who their friends are, asking them to keep up with us, like, hey, who is your friend? What do they do? What do their parents do? Do they go to church? So we really get that information so we can keep tabs on what they're doing and what they're learning, what they're thinking about. And we keep them grounded here in church. We make sure they come to a bunch of events. Naturally they kind of had to because it was like, Dad's babysitting you got to go to work with him. So, in that sense, we've been very fortunate to have that sort of, daycare system here at the church where you guys have all helped raise our kids. Thank you.
It is a great thing to be able to have a church where your kids are welcomed and encouraged, and they see other Christians. It's so important for kids growing up to go to church. Yeah. What would happen if they ever got to the point where they said, we don't feel like going to church? What would be the reaction there?
We would say, it doesn't matter what you feel like, you're going anyways. We're going.
Yeah, we need Jesus, right? Even when we don't feel like it necessarily. Well, Leslie, thank you so much for sharing your life with us today, and how you found security and hope in Jesus, and how you're passing it along to your children and to others. Jesus said in John 12:46, I have come into the world as light, so that whoever believes in me may not remain in darkness. There is light in Jesus Christ. When we have Christ in our life and our family, all the difference is made. If you feel that you're in darkness today, and you need hope, and you need security, and you need peace, Jesus is waiting, and I encourage you to come to him, just as Leslie has. Call on him and follow him, and he will give you rest. He will give you blessing beyond whatever you could ever ask or think. Leslie, would you close us in prayer today?
Yes.
Let's pray.
Thank you, Lord, for giving me this opportunity to share with the church today. I just pray, God, that my story and my testimony would be enlightening to some people. Anyone who is looking for encouragement or has gone through similar circumstances to me, I just pray, God, that knowing that they're not alone in whatever trial they went through would just bring them comfort, Lord. So we thank you for this morning. We thank you for the rest of the day and the week to come. We pray that you'll be with those who just need your presence. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Leslie. It was great having you.